Secrets never last. After the discovery of the final resting place for the Guardians of the Forge, the looting of the tombs began. Now, picked clean, the site is nothing more than a waypoint for smugglers, a hiding place for criminals, and a hunting ground for creatures looking for their next meal.
Hey everybody, Jim the Tabletop Engineer here, and welcome to a new episode. You may notice that I'm not in my workshop, and it's mainly because this thing is just too big and unwieldy to film in there. So I've moved it into another area of our basement, and I want to show it off to you. Here's the thing. This is a fixed piece of terrain. Everything so far is glued down so that it's one easy piece to move. Let me show it to you. It's very light. I can lift it with one hand. One hand. It's all foam. And let me spin it around for you here so you can just see. Yes, it is large, and that was what I intended. I wanted to have a large piece of terrain, 3 dimensions, that I could play Frostgrave, Relicblade, or some other fantasy role-playing games. As you can see, it's got this what they call pool blue, which is an apple barrel paint from Plaid. This is a metallic called fire opal, and the columns and the edges are all painted in blue quartz, which is another metallic from Plaid. Now, let me show you this real quick. This is what I started with. A few videos back, I designed this prototype. And this was just to sort of give me an idea of what the final thing would look like. But there are some deviations. First, I'm not doing the walkways that go off into nowhere. What I realized is that although they might look cool, they would require more columns, because otherwise they're just going to get broken off with a hand come down or too much weight. So columns, are good in the sense that they block line of sight. They're bad in the sense that if you have too many of them, it just gets real complicated to get your hand in there. If you're a war gamer or an RPGer and you're moving minis around, whether you're a DM or a player, you want to have room to maneuver. Too many columns is just going to interfere with that. So I scrapped the walkways. The other thing you'll probably notice is I went originally with an octagonal, fourth layer up here. And in this one, I've got a square, diamond with the orientation, all right? It just worked out that way. Now, one thing you may notice, because the top layer is turned to make a diamond with respect to the others, that meant that 2 edges, this front one and the back one, were unsupported, and they were really on these 2 pillars. This was just too. It was fragile. It really was. So I came up with this idea of making a longer column that goes down to floor 3, and also one on the back side here. And it turned out really nice, and it gives this the support it needs. So those are the only major changes from the prototype. So what happens now? Well, the structure is done. So in the 3rd and final video part of this series, what I'm going to be doing is adding all the details that really make it look like a real fantasy setting. There will be tombs or sarcophagi. I don't know what the plural of that word is, but I found these online. On Thingiverse, just the sarcophagus. The lid was had a human figure on it. So what I did was I took it into a CAD program, cut it off, and then I used some files from Fat Dragon Games. They have a 3D printable set of files called the Mountain King, and there's a lot of dwarven scenes and figures in there. And so what I did was I took some of Tom Tullis's figures. Here's a little dwarf holding a battle, it looks like a hammer. And I just chopped them off the wall, rotated them, and put them on the stone. And then I resized it. This was only about 1 inch in length. So I did some test prints and enlarged it. It's almost 2 full inches. But these will be set in various places on the structure. The other thing that I got from Tom was he had these little braziers, I think that's the correct pronunciation, for a flame, and he also had the file to print the flame. Now I printed the flame in yellow plastic, and I'll show this in the third video. And I enlarged this because I used these small spherical LEDs. These were a recommendation from DM Scotty and Brian Swift, so calling out to you guys is a big thank you for this. But they're LEDs. I don't even know if you can see that. You put it in. It's very bright. And you put this on, and you get that nice glow. It's not showing up too well in the video because of the lights overhead, the LED lights. But trust me, it's glowing. So, and I've got some other surprises. I've got some pennants that I'm going to be adding. I'm thinking about cobwebs. Not really sure yet. There may even be sound effects. I'm toying with something right now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it to work, but it would allow you to push a button or two and create some sound effects. We'll see. So anyway, let's get to the tabletop. I'll show you real fast how I got all the final things put together, which was basically the third and fourth floor. Video 1 was the ground floor and second floor. This video will show you the third and fourth floor plus some more of the column work. And then in the next video, I'll get all the detail work done, and I will have this amazing diorama that's still very light. I can stick it up high in my workshop where this can just slot on there and out of place and out of the way. So let's get to the tabletop, show you how I wrap this up, and look forward to the next video where I finish it up. The third floors are 24 inches by 10 inches with the ends cut off. I went ahead and applied the diamond template that I 3D printed and then black bombed the entire thing. The sides get 2 coatings of the blue quartz, and then for the octagons on the surface I use Apple Barrel's Pool Blue. I basically hand paint everything. Some people may not like that, but I like the cartoonish look it gives it. While the paint was drying, I went and cut the columns. These are all 1 by 1 inch columns cut to 4 inch length. And then I use 1/2 inch foam to cut 2 bases for each column. I do this on my Proxxon, and then I set the Proxxon to do beveled cuts, and I just cut off just the top half of it right here, you can see, and then I glue the 4 inch on top, one on top and one on bottom.
Each month, Bexham's Bizarre RPG and Wargaming magazine provides gamers with articles, props to print and cut out for players, mini adventures, new monsters, and much more. Look in the description below for details on how to get a few free issues so you can see what you're missing.
While the bases were drying, while the glue was drying, I went back and finished the third floor with the fire opal. They get these little triangles, and again, I do this all by hand. And then I use a sponge to sponge paint the fire opal on the edges, and I use a smaller piece of foam to get closer to the painting I've already done, so I don't mess it up. You can see the small piece of foam right here. I go back to the columns and I just use a blade, and what I do is I just basically cut out chunks on the side and at the base just to sort of give it a damaged look. You don't have to do this. I will be adding some detail work to the columns later, but this adds a nice touch. Then I paint up all the columns again with the blue quartz. This is part of the Treasure Gold paint series, metallic paint series from Plaid. The third floor gets white on the bottom. This just helps reflect light so that it's a little brighter between the second and third floors. While that paint was drying, I began work on the fourth floor. So again, cut this to size. Initially, I cut it 10 inches by 10 inches, and it's using a 1/2 inch piece of foam. I 3D printed the template that I've used throughout this video series. I found the center point, and then I put 4 of these. You can see me pressing down really hard here. It just sort of bites into the foam, and then I have to use a blade to go and cut all the grout lines, and then I widen them with a pen. After I use the pen to do all the grout lines, I just take a piece of aluminum foil and then rough up the surface to give it a stony texture. After test fitting, I found the top piece to be too big, so I trimmed the edges back to 1/4 inch on each side of the 4 template stamps that I made. This edge will be sponge painted with the fire opal. I black bombed the entire surface and let that dry really well. Then I went and hit the octagons with 2 coats of the pool blue. I do them very quick so they have a dirty appearance on the edges. You can see I'm not getting all the way to the edge, and that's intentional. When the paint dries, it gives them a worn look. The edges, once again, get the blue quartz metallic on the side. 2 coats. If you don't do 2, the pink will show through, or at least it did in my experience. The columns got damaged again. These are the columns that I created, 4 of them for the top floor. I went back and hit the top floor with the fire opal for the little triangles. And then I sponge painted that very thin 1/4 inch edge all the way around. I gave it a coat of a dark gray first to cover the black. Then I went and did the sponge painting. Here I am just gluing the columns on. Now these are the columns that separate the second and the third floor. I had to experiment to try to find their best location. Here you can see the third floor glued onto the second floor. And here is the final 4th floor glued on. And if you look to the left and right beneath the top floor, you'll see 2 columns are missing. This was a very fragile base. So I created 2 more of these longer columns here. Basically, they're 2 of the 4 inches glued together. I painted them up, glued them in place. Here is the final structure. The prototype is sitting down on the bottom floor near the front. So you can see the difference in size between the prototype and the final version.